Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on 3 steps to reduce risk with AI-powered ASPM. My name is Mark Lambert. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at ArmorCode, and I'm looking forward to stepping through this with you all. As we go through the presentation, please do add questions in the Q&A box in Zoom. I'll get to those at the end. Devin, who's also in the session as well, he'll be putting in links as we go through the session, as well as actually responding to any of those questions that's appropriate. Okay, if you have any problems with the connection, just send a message in the chat. We'll be able to kind of deal with that there as well. All right, with that being said, let's get into it and let's talk about ASPM and let's talk about what it does and why you actually don't need another scanner. That's not the answer. But before we jump into ASPM and application security posture management, let's talk about the challenge that we're solving. And as we all know, really software security risk has become an exponentially complex challenge. It's complex because of the architectures that are now being deployed. So cloud, containers, infrastructure as code has really meant that software is getting out into the market much, much quicker. It also means our attack surface is much, much larger. Also, leveraging open source has exposed us as well to not just accelerated software delivery, because it can now start leveraging code that's already built, but also potential vulnerabilities being identified within those. So really, all of this has led to 3 things. So we've got obviously more vulnerabilities. NVD has run into challenges with being able to keep up with the number of CVEs that are being entered. We have more threat actors, both commercial and government or nation actors, really leading to over 90% of success or organizations experiencing some kind of successful cyber attack. Ultimately costing us all a lot of time and obviously organizations a lot of business. However, our traditional approach is really fundamentally flawed. It scales linearly if you're lucky. Hiring more personnel, bringing more people on board, although many organizations struggle to find the right resources. So ultimately what ends up happening is we just bring in more tools, and that leads to the real challenge. So when we talk about application security posture management, we talk about how ArmorCode fits within this. ArmorCode is in the application security and the vulnerability management space, but we're not a scanner. There are already hundreds of those out there, and that's the challenge that we help solve. This challenge here of lots of disconnected silos of information that you're having to somehow bring together, and then you're having to figure out, how do I coordinate this across my security development and DevOps teams? This ultimately leads to a lot of chaos that is unmanaged, along with unmanaged and out of control risk that's ultimately getting out into your production environments. And as I said, this is one part of the problem. It's the tools. We've got, more and more tools generating more and more findings, and you're being asked to basically fix everything. We kind of have a zero tolerance to vulnerabilities within the industry. So we're saying, okay, you got to fix everything. Let's start with the criticals and highs. And I'm pretty sure everybody on this webinar struggles to even keep up with that. But the reality is, the threat actors are actually focused on everything. They're not just focused on the critical highs. They're focused on how can they leverage mediums, potentially chaining those together to really exploit your business critical or your externally facing resources. So what we have to do fundamentally as an industry is change from focusing on fixing findings and vulnerabilities prioritized based upon severity to moving to really focusing on risk. And this has been done in the vulnerability management space and in the GRC space for a while now. And now we're beginning to see, as vulnerability management and application security come together, we're starting to see that this is getting more broader adoption within software security as a whole. So this is one of the fundamental things that we focus on at ArmorCode. So as I said earlier, ArmorCode is not a scanner. We have no intention of being a scanner today or in the future. There are already literally hundreds of those out there today. And we integrate today with over 250 different scanners, everything from threat modeling and the application security stack, all the way through cloud, containers, and into traditional infrastructure, vulnerability management, even endpoint as well. The ability to be able to bring all of that data together breaking down the silos, facilitating better team collaboration, facilitating better visibility, ultimately helps you achieve three primary things. First of all, you're able to understand and know what your risk is by ingesting that data in, by prioritizing it, by scoring by risk, and being able to understand how that fits within your own application portfolio helps you understand where your security posture is, but also understand what the trend is and how we can work to improve. Once we figure out kind of what our position is, that path to improvement is critical and important. So we prioritize what work to work on, where we need to be able to focus our efforts, how do we perform remediation, and then ultimately, of course, we need to prove the state of our current posture and be able to demonstrate the ability to auditors, for example, or internal compliance teams that we're doing the work that we need to do. Especially in the case of audits for IEC, for example, or PII. Or PCI, but also in the case of any kind of event, when we're doing our own internal audit, we need to make sure that we're actually following the processes that we've previously defined. So, as I look forward and I say, okay, well, that's, how do I really break this down into an action plan that we can take? There are really three steps. The first is observe, then act, and then improve. So when we start thinking about observe, this is again where we're trying to bring in the data from the entire ecosystem and really unify visibility from cloud to code and really beyond just cloud, because most organizations, while we may be cloud focused today, many enterprise organizations are going to still have a lot of systems that are business critical systems that aren't cloud native, that aren't deployed in the cloud. And we need to take that into consideration. We're also going to have scanners, which are specialized for particular types of technology stack. And we need the ability to be able to bring all of that in, whether or not they're deployed in the cloud, the SaaS, it's a SaaS tool, or if it's on-premise, deployed as part of my pipeline, or even hosted internally. We need to bring all of that data together. And that's what we specialize at ArmorCode. As I said, we support over 250 integrations today. And it's really, that number in itself is pretty amazing. But that number is probably not the thing that's on the front of your mind. The thing that's on the front of your mind is, do you support all of the tools that I have? And if you don't support the tools that I have, how do you react? How do you expand upon them? And that's really what's driven those 250 plus integrations, has been the partnership that we've had with some of the great organizations that we're working with today. So every one of those 250 integrations has been driven by a customer request as part of engaging with ArmorCode. So once we've got the data in, we can now start to understand our security posture. But really what we fundamentally want to do is we want to act, right? We don't want to just look at a massive volume of data. We want to start acting on that data. And actually, because the data is now in, this is what gives us the ability to really start leveraging the power of AI. Now, many of you, I'm sure, are I've heard AI on every webinar that you've attended for the last year and a half. And at ArmorCode, we've taken a very pragmatic approach to how to leverage AI. And we're doing it to really focus on removing the bottlenecks in the overall process and workflow that we're managing so that we can ultimately optimize the efforts. And the foundation for our AI, which we'll talk about in a moment, is what we refer to as our 3 Vs. So without volume, variety, and validation, you really can't build meaningful or powerful AI. So when I talk about volume, I'm talking about the amount of findings that we've processed, the amount of findings that we've been able to gain insights from. And that at ArmorCode now, we've tipped over the 10 billion number of findings that we've processed. The next is the variety of the data, because you can have a lot of findings, a lot of volume, but maybe it's siloed to just one particular technology area, such as static application security testing or software composition analysis. This is where our 250 integrations come in. Those out-of-the-box integrations with a whole variety of different scan types. As I said, the application security stacks of SAST, DAST, IAST, SCA, and all of the other acronyms that sit inside of there, cloud security posture management, infrastructure as code, being able to look at that data and really understand the relationships across those helps us drive some of our AI use cases. And then last is validation. If you've got a model that you've developed, you need to be able to get validation. Hey, is the model doing the thing that it should or should not do? And that's where our community comes in. So ArmorCode is being leveraged by over 2,000 security engineers supporting over 75,000 developers in their development and security efforts. So how can we use AI to really unlock those bottlenecks? What are the bottlenecks that we're focused on? And this is what we talk about: the what, where, and how. So first of all is the what. What are we going to fix, and why? I mean, what are we going to focus on? This is where, of course, risk scoring comes in, where what we're doing within ArmorCode is we're taking the technical risk associated with a finding that comes from the source tool. We're then further leveraging threat intelligence information from both open source as well as commercial threat intelligence feeds, so that we can put a score on that technical risk and kind of like further classify it to really kind of think about the likelihood of something being happening, either if there is an active exploit known, or, for example, let's say it has an EPSS score, so an exploit predictability score that's high. We can then start using that to further prioritize where we need to focus. And then again, this is where AI can start to help, because now we can start to unlock things like prediction around where we need to prioritize as well. So given the data that we've seen within a team, within an organization, or a community as a whole, we can identify things that are potentially false positives, given the historical analysis and the models that have been built up. Again, machine learning kind of like starts to unlock that potential. The second area, which is also another application of machine learning, is actually helping us identify where the root cause of an issue is and where the point of remediation is. So often when organizations look at things like container security, a runtime issue and a container security, struggle with being able to correlate that back to where it was originated in the infrastructure as code, or also, a little bit more focused on the application security side, kind of like figuring out where a particular DAST finding, what that root cause is. And again, this is where machine learning comes in. And at ArmorCode, we've deployed over half a dozen different correlation models as part of our AI-powered correlation that does things like such as connecting DAST and SAS together. So given a DAST finding from something like a burp suite or even a penetration testing activity, being able to take that finding and understand the context of it, and then correlate that with SAS findings that we've found earlier in the pipeline, which identify where the root cause is and where the point of remediation is. The recent advancements in AI have really unlocked a lot of potential there, where we can really start to infer context from the findings, rather than having to do traditional correlation between DAST and SAS, which would have heavy level code level instrumentation. So we can do this based upon that data that we're ingesting. And again, it's driven by the fact that we have all of these different integrations being leveraged by different organizations, where we're able to start building the model, and where we're through validation is the community can optionally submit additional examples for our data science team to use for training activities. The third area of where we're able to start leveraging AI to remove the bottlenecks in the process is around remediation. And this is where we're leveraging an LLM that's pre-trained on how to address vulnerabilities and weaknesses. That pre-trained LLM will generate me remediation guidance, really like a strategic action plan as to what I need to do to be able to remediate a particular functionality or a particular issue. Now, because we're also doing it at a level above the scanner, we're able to be a little bit more strategic. We're able to start thinking about how to remediate findings of multiple different types, rather than kind of at a scanner level, where for a SAS, for example, we may have a model which is generating as a line of code fix, which is very powerful from that particular scanner perspective. But if we think about something like, for example, software composition analysis, it's like, hey, yeah, to update this particular issue or to fix this particular issue, replace the library. Well, that can't always be done. We can't necessarily update to the latest Python version, because that will break a lot of things from a functional perspective. What is my other strategy? What are other things that I could do as alternatives? Also, when we think about a vulnerability, and a vulnerability from an open source weakness, for example, we're reacting to that. So the reaction is to fix update the library. But how can I be a little bit more proactive? Kind of what are my other strategies to protect myself so that when the next vulnerability is found, I have some defensive techniques that are inside of the code base already. So code hardening, training, for example, is another thing that you would build into your remediation, action plan. So this is how we're leveraging AI within ArmorCode to help start removing the bottlenecks in the process. So what to fix, where to fix, and how to fix. But at the end of the day, you also want to be able to automate a lot of that. And that's where our no-code automation comes in. So, there are always going to be things that you need to spend kind of like, cognitive brain power on to say, okay, let me dig into this, make sure like do further investigation. But there are also going to be a lot of things that we can automatically escalate and ticket. This is where the no-code automation within ArmorCode comes into effect. And we have over 1 million different permutations of use cases that you can use ArmorCode's no-code automation for. Really often what I talk about, key examples will be ticket creations, escalations, notifications, but automated triaging activities, automated notifications around SLAs and the things coming due, process workflows that you can automate within ArmorCode are typical examples of kind of how we can leverage them. Okay, so we've gone through observe, we've gone into act. The third step of the process is improving. How can we focus on kind of like doing it better? How are we doing kind of like from the point of view of burning up or burning down our security debt? How can we understand that we're actually fixing more things than are coming in? And if we aren't, how do we react? How are we doing on our service level agreements? Not just the end-to-end service level agreement, but breaking it down further, because when we have a security vulnerability or a security issue, you've really got two phases. You've got your triaging and your remediation phase. How am I doing at my triaging? How am I doing at my remediation? How am I able to break that down by team so I could understand what teams need more resources or what teams need more education? How can I understand my MTTR, my mean time to remediation? All of these things are how we build a process of improvement. Also, really at the end of the day, ultimately moving from something that's a reactive software security program where we are looking to just play whack-a-mole with vulnerabilities that they come up, to be more of a proactive software security program where we're looking to find things like weaknesses that are systemic within our organization and start to build campaigns around that to burn down that debt within our critical assets that we've identified as part of our risk scoring. So in essence, that's the 3 steps. The first, observe, bringing the data in from cloud applications, code, cloud applications, and infrastructure. And really, when you think about application, the definition of the application right now has expanded beyond just the code. So we've got to think about the infrastructure that it's sitting with, and that really is what's driven this adoption of application security posture management in this intersection between traditional application security and vulnerability management. The next step is, once we've observed and we've found, we've got visibility, the next thing is we now need to act. And obviously prioritization is key. Leveraging risk scoring to understand, to make sure that we're prioritizing the functionality or prioritizing our efforts on our business critical assets, because even if I have a vulnerability that has got an active exploit in the industry, if it's on a back-end data sciences application that's not externally facing, yes, we still have to fix it, but we need to fix the one that's on our externally facing core business system that's running our core customer interfaces. We have to fix that one first. So again, prioritizing based upon where the risk to the business is, and then automating the process so that when something comes in that's a high priority, the next 0 day, that I'm able to mobilize the team as quickly as possible. And that's where automation is a key component in that. And ultimately driving down the time that it takes to do the remediation, through the remediation guidance, for example, and the root cause analysis that the correlation provides. So now we're moving forward, and again, improve. Like, okay, not just saying, okay, what is our current posture? We're looking to improve that current posture, but how does that risk trend over time? Are we reducing it? Are we in compliance with our SLAs based upon our time-based activities? Are we reducing our MTTRs? And also burning down the backlog. Focus the teams on a prioritized backlog, kind of an active live backlog based upon risk, but also proactively saying, hey, this is going to be our initiative. We know, for example, that input validation is an area which we have seen active exploits within the functionality that we're using today. Let's go ahead and actually focus on that again on our business critical assets and business critical projects. So just a few examples of organizations that are leveraging ArmorCode today. We're actually very fortunate to be working with over 24 of the Fortune 1000. And the results that organizations are seeing are truly making significant changes and improvements to their overall software security position, but also optimizing of that process. So Shutterfly example, a lot of you know from the point of view of creating, in essence, branded items like mugs, Christmas cards, and the like. They saw an 81% reduction in their critical security debt, bringing on board ArmorCode and leveraging that as part of their program. Very much focused on application security initially. Now they've much more focused on bringing in the vulnerability data from infrastructure tools like Wiz and Tenable for the like, and the like. Johnson Controls, a great example of product security, kind of not just looking at the code, but understanding the code and the infrastructure that is deployed upon, but also understanding that not every application is deployed within the cloud. So Johnson Controls do a lot of smart office automation functionality. So here we're going to have devices, we're going to have software that runs on those devices, we're going to have software that's deployed on infrastructure that's outside of our control, so for data centers, for example. That software has a life cycle. Once it's released, it then has to be supported for a number of years. We also have to be able to react to security issues in that released software, even though the development team have moved forward and they're building the next generation. We also need to be able to demonstrate audit compliance to organizations like IEC. And this is where Johnson Controls have seen a 2.5 times increase in the productivity of the security team, driven by the visibility and the process improvements. Pure Storage, great example of vulnerability management. And really one of the challenges that Pure Storage were facing was having the development teams really take on ownership and willingness to do the patches that needed to be done. And the challenge of that is, like, when you just throw a whole bunch of patches or upgrades that need to be performed at the development team, they're like, okay, great, yeah, I'll get to it later. But if you can provide additional context, and say, yep, this is really important because there's an active exploit in the industry. If you can reduce the amount of noise, so rather than sending 4 findings from 4 different tools and alerting them 4 times, you send them 1 ticket and you say, hey, this ticket has got a finding from tool X. This ticket has also got another tool finding from tool Y, and adding to that ticket rather than creating and bombarding them with more. And then again, prioritizing to make sure that we're only giving them those which are going to be business critical, and saying, you know what, this one is something we have to stop. We have to get in now. Don't care what else we're working on. It's a critical, or hey, this is something that we can work on as part of our debt. It can go into the next sprint or the next release cycle. So don't take just our word for it. You should definitely, when you're looking at technology like an application security posture management platform, you really need to start to look at kind of like what others have experienced. And we're very honored to have a great reviews on the Gartner Peer Insights platform. And I definitely invite you to go ahead and check those out. We do work and collaborate with our customers. So as we start to see that feedback, that's great validation for us, but it's also identifies areas where we're able to start expanding out the platform into additional use cases or additional capabilities and improvements as well. So with that all being said, thank you very much for watching today. I'm going to go ahead and check the questions. It looks like we had a couple of questions that have come in while I was going through this. But if you'd like to learn more about what I've shown you today, go to the ArmorCode website, click the request a demo button, and you'll get a personalized demo, really kind of going deeper into the platform, showing you it live as we go through things. So with that being said, let's go ahead and look at some of the questions that we got. Okay. How do you scale ASPM? Okay, so that's a really good question, because it depends upon your organization. So with scale, the first thing is, when you start looking at application security, you get a lot of findings, especially when you start looking at SaaS. So you have to think about, how do I scale on the volume of data? And as I said earlier, ArmorCode's processed over 10 billion findings today. So kind of like thinking about how do I scale that? There's a couple of things. First of all, it's going to be correlation and grouping. So taking the data from across the different tools and kind of bringing them together. So I'm not, in essence, got the same vulnerability coming from 10 tools and creating 10 tickets. I already talked about that. But it's also kind of like focus from a prioritization perspective, but also focused from a level of correlation. So if a particular issue has been found by numerous tools, it's highly correlated, probably means that it's more likely to be a real issue. Therefore, we need to start remediating it. It also gives us a better focus from kind of like burning down our backlog. The second part of scaling that often comes up in organizations is how do I scale this across my enterprise? So, we're very fortunate, as I said earlier, to be working with some very large organizations, S&P Global, NetApp, for example. Both have very large software development teams and very large software portfolios. The key thing there is being able to connect to the infrastructure that you have, the source tools, your code repositories, your CMDBs, and using that to gain insights as to what you need to ingest into the platform, but then also using automation to automatically onboard that inside of the platform. Now, what I will say is that's usually sounds very easy to do, but the reality is that many organizations have very different naming conventions or tagging frameworks, and many organizations have struggled to kind of like roll that out across the organization. This is where the flexibility of the ArmorCode platform comes in, where we can actually develop very sophisticated ways of understanding how your infrastructure or how your development ecosystem is configured, and then mapping that into the ArmorCode framework, mapping that into our hierarchies as well as our scopes and groups, so that you can structure the data so that you can get kind of visibility in a way that can be consumed by others in the team. Okay, I think we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'll kind of fly through a couple of these. How do you engage with developers and asset owners? Integrations with ticketing systems is key here. So, for example, integrating with Jira, creating the tickets inside of Jira. We have a plugin for Jira that gives us a dynamic interactivity between both ArmorCode and Jira. Most platforms in the ASPM space will have Jira ticketing. Bi-directionality, the ability to be able to kind of like update a comment in the system, have it go into Jira. That's also pretty much table stakes today. What we've done is we've gone beyond those two levels and also introduced our Jira plugin, which allows the developers to be able to perform actions directly within Jira, so you can streamline that kind of like interaction, not taking them out of the ecosystem that they live in. The other is the way that you notify them. So notifying them through Jira workflows, but also notifying through things like Slack and Teams, of course, emails, but emails are much better from a reporting perspective, not really something that I would normally focus on from the point of view of getting a development team's attention. Does ASPM enable intersection between AppSec and vulnerability management? I think I already addressed that one, but yes, in short, I see this world where application security and vulnerability management are really colliding in a good way through the adoption of cloud and containers and infrastructure as code. What this ultimately means is you have, if you keep your vulnerability management and your application security program separate, you end up not only with friction between security and development, but also internal friction within the security team itself. So by bringing it all together under ASPM, that really helps you have a consistent or more holistic view and process around software security. Software supply chain also falls into this as well. Ingesting SBOMs, having an understanding of my software inventory as well. It's kind of like the third leg of that stool. And then I think the last question we've got time for here, what scanners do you integrate with? Well, as I said, we have over 250, so there's no way that I can go through all of those. And actually, that 250 is not as important for you as do we integrate with the scanners that you have. So, I think the best way of answering that question is actually for you to click on the request a demo. It'll engage you with our team. We can talk through what you have. But it's not just about if we have it or not. It's how do we react? So we release software every week. Typically takes us between 2 and 3 weeks to create a new integration. And that's kind of driven by customers, by getting access and getting access to the technology and starting to bring that in. And that's what has fundamentally driven up our number to over 250 now. So again, the best way to answer that question is to understand what your ecosystem looks like today. So please go ahead and kind of click the request a demo, and our team will be able to talk through that. All right, I think we've gone through all the questions. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the questions. I really appreciate the opportunity to give this presentation to you. As I said, if you'd like to learn more, go ahead, click the request a demo button on the website. With that being said, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar or on our Let's Talk ASPM podcast that will also include in the links in the show notes for this video. Okay, thanks very much. Take care.